Welcome, everybody. It's time to start cruising into a better financial future with your host, Kim Cruz. Welcome, everybody. It's time to start cruising into a better financial future with your host, Kim Cruz. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the very first podcast and episode of Cruising into a Better Financial Future. I'm Adam Strum, and I'd like to introduce your host, the founder of Cruz Credit Consulting, Kim Cruz.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here myself. I am Kim Cruz. I'm a wife, a mom, a daughter, a sister, friend, entrepreneur, and the proud business owner of Cruz Credit Consulting, but not necessarily in that order. I do have over 30 years experience in corporate America and a passion for helping people succeed in all areas of their life. As mentioned, I am joined by my good friend, Adam Strum. He is the brains behind this production. He is the owner of Financial Rescuers and co-owner of U.S. Financial Alliance, and a 20-year veteran of helping people get out of debt and improve their financial health. Together, we review our listeners' financial problems and address them with our experience, tips, tricks, and resources of network referrals to help you cruise into a better financial future.
Tim, thank you very much for that introduction. I am so happy to be a part of this, and I can't wait till we get into our first topic today. But before we do that, I'd like to lay out what our normal format will be every week. Every show will start with an introduction of you and I, of course, so that people know who we're talking to. But we will go from that into a subject of the week, a credit-worthy news item or article of the week. After that, we will introduce our guest. We do have a guest for our very first show. He's a former client, former employee of my former business, Financial Rescuers. And he's a man who's been through our main topic today, which is bankruptcy. He's been through one in recent times, in the last 2 years, and he's going to speak to us about what happens step by step as you go through it and help us answer a bunch of questions from our mailbag, which is how we fill the middle of our show. So if we're ready, I'd like to get started and throw our topic for discussion for the day out. And we're going to invite Tom, our guest, to take part. Before I even introduce him and tell you his whole background, Tom, just say hello.
Hello, all.
There's Tom.
I'm happy to be a part of this.
And we're happy to have you on as our very first guest. Okay, so today's topic from the news. It was just reported in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal that banks will make $4 billion this year from overdraft fees.
That is unbelievable. And the ironic thing is that when you're in a financial situation and you can't pay your bill and your bank gets overdrawn, what happens? You're charged more charges and more fees, right? It's just like a never-ending cycle to get out of when you're charged these fees. So yeah, that's a doozy. That definitely is a doozy and a great topic to talk about.
$4 billion is approximately the profit margin over a whole year for any one of the major banks. So here we are, an extra $4 billion a year just from overdraft fees. It amazed me to read the article. It amazed me how much they like to kick people when they're down. Tom, do you have any opinion on overdraft fees?
Yes, I would like to state one thing.
Sure.
With the economic crisis that's going on today, the banks should be ashamed of themselves with everybody who is suffering through the COVID and all the other problems that are going on in the United States, that the banks have the audacity to charge these fees when people are struggling.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the fact is that overdraft fees are actually somewhat new. Banks have been around for a couple of 100 years at this point, but overdraft fees have only been around for the last 45 years. Now, there was a time in the early 70s where if you overdrew your account, the bank simply closed your account. There was no overdraft fees. Overdraft fees came to pass in the early 1980s. And I cannot comprehend for the life of me what thinking led to, oh, this person's broke, charge them a fee.
Yeah.
On top of a fee, on top of a fee, on top of a fee, because they keep being incurred every time something tries to hit your account.
Exactly. So you can actually wind up with 10, and I've seen people with 10 to 20 of these overdraft fees all occurring in a single week because they overdrew their account because maybe a check they deposited bounced and didn't clear and they thought the money was there. So they scheduled all of their payments, their credit card payment, and then all of those bounce. So then on top of that, you have your bank charging you all these overdraft fees at $35 a pop. But then your credit cards and everyone else you're paying is going to charge you the same thing on their end because your payment to them bounced.
I was
So
actually a victim of that.
you were a victim of that. Yes, I actually recall that. You and I have discussed that. So that's my news item for the day. And it really, to make the change, people have to speak up. And let's be honest, if enough people write in to their bank, whoever their bank is, whether it's Chase, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, or even a little local credit union, if enough members and enough account holders tell the bank we want overdraft fees to stop, the bank will waive them. It took a huge effort to get them to stop charging ATM fees for customers. But
That is true.
no bank charges those anymore due to massive customer write-ins and inquiries. So it is possible when we all work together to make a change in the banking industry. They don't want to lose customers. Customers are how they make their billions of dollars.
Very true.
And you're absolutely right. I think, Adam, you mentioned this in the beginning. Banks should be ashamed of themselves for the way that they operate in some manners.
It
Well,
used to be banks would work with the people. Now the banks work against the people.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what we're finding more and more.
and I think it's terrible. I really do. Well,
Great topic to bring up, Adam. Thank you for bringing that up. And like I said, if we band together, let's get those letters out to our banks to stop those fees.
here are a couple of quick tips to avoid bank overdraft fees. Number one, do not use auto pay. Pay your bills one at a time. Make sure that you have the funds available to pay each bill. Tip number two, see if your bank offers linking to a credit card or a savings account to cover any time that you overdraft. And then three, see if your bank offers overdraft protection at a very low cost. If the charge is monthly or is too high, it's not worth it. Those are some tips and tricks to avoid overdraft fees. The best thing you can do is sign on and get many others to sign a petition letting your bank know that you are against overdraft fees. Okay, so we're going to move to our next segment now, and this is our favorite segment of the show, and it's a multi-participation. You're going to hear from all three of us on our main subject of the day. We get a ton of emails to Cruz Credit Consulting and U.S. Financial Alliance about a whole array of financial topics, but the number one thing people ask questions about, because there's a lot of myth out there about it, is bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy is probably the number one topic that my clients have the most questions about. And it's because they don't have the knowledge. And bankruptcy is often that dirty, nasty word that nobody wants to think about. They don't want to consider it. They think it's a death sentence. But sometimes it is the only way out. There are some that think that they can rack up bills and not pay them and then file bankruptcy, which we'll find out isn't necessarily the case, right? But sometimes it is the only way to get a fresh start. With 22,000 businesses filing bankruptcy in 2019 and over 770,000 individuals filing bankruptcy, we know that people are in a financial disarray, that they need some sort of alternative. And bankruptcy does have serious consequences and will we'll go into detail about what those consequences are and the particulars about how to file. But I'm glad that this is our topic today because it is much, much needed information that our audience needs to hear. So let's dive into our topic for today.
And so for our very first show, we're going to cover the nuclear weapon in the financial world that is known as bankruptcy. And I have, and Kim has helped me with this over the week, picked out 5 questions from 5 people across the U.S. who emailed us to our companies. And we're going to have an expert who's been through a bankruptcy sit in and answer these questions with us. And that is, Tom. And Tom, you have been an employee of Financial Rescuers. You have been through a bankruptcy. You were also a client at one point.
That is correct.
And you chose to go the bankruptcy route when it became too difficult to continue the debt relief program that you were in.
Absolutely correct. The path I took was a very hard thing to try to do, but it actually made my life a lot easier. And at least now I could sleep at night because I don't have everybody pounding on my door.
Understood. Or pounding on your phone or pounding on your mailbox, or there's lots of ways they love to harass you when you owe money, isn't there?
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So, Kim, do you have the list of questions as well?
I do. I do.
So I'm going to ask the first one to you to start off, and then you can ask the second one to me.
Okay.
So we have Lewis in Tennessee, and he wants to know, how does he go about finding a good bankruptcy attorney, one that he can trust?
Well, there are all kinds of attorneys out there. Some good, some bad, some really, really bad. But the first place I would look is for referrals. Definitely for referrals, and don't sign up with the first attorney that you speak to. Definitely interview them. Find out who you feel most comfortable with, because you want to make sure that they have your best interest in mind, not just the first one that you see and the first one that's willing to cash your check or take your money. You want to make sure that they're working on your behalf, and it's somebody that you have to be comfortable with, because this can be a very long process. We'll get into this in a little bit, but depending on what type of bankruptcy, you're going to be working with this person for a while, and you want to make sure that you're in good hands.
Most definitely.
I totally agree with you. So my answer, very similar to Kim's, is definitely referral. You can look up on avvo.com. There's a good directory. It's sort of the Yelp of the legal industry, and see what people say about the attorney you're considering. And I'll tell you right up front, do not even consider an attorney that doesn't give you a free consultation and bankruptcy screening. Those should always be free. You should be able to get a half-hour meeting at least, that's the minimum, with a licensed practicing attorney who will check to see what you qualify for, as there are different types of bankruptcy, and we will get into those in a future question. And let them know exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to proceed. And when I bring Tom in to give his answer, I'd like him to talk about that. I know how he found his attorney. I happen to be the one who referred him to him. But when he went to see that attorney is when everything changed. He felt so much better after that initial free consultation.
Yes.
Tom, go ahead and talk about that experience of finding the attorney and meeting them for the first time.
Well, I do have to thank Adam in that respect. He opened up the door for quite a few different attorneys. I landed on one that was highly recommended. He was a wonderful person to sit down with. We discussed our problems. Most of my debt was through hospitalization, which that could be another topic for a show down the road, where doctors charge you an arm and a leg. But to get back to
they also charge you for an arm and a leg.
Oh, yeah. But to get back to the subject, yes, you need to find somebody that you definitely feel comfortable with. My attorney was very upfront, he was rough in the beginning, but that's what you need to be knocked into the real world. Because when you're filing for something of that magnitude, you don't realize all the different avenues and different ways you can file for bankruptcy. There are different chapters. There's different ways to do it. We filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, not Chapter 13, which is a whole different subject, which Adam can help with.
We have a question coming up about the chapters and the different types of bankruptcy, so we're going to go into detail on that.
We worked very diligently, and we had a little bit of a setback where there was a death in the family, and there was also a payout from that death, which we could not take due to the fact that we were in bankruptcy, and that paid off some of the debt that we owed. So you have to be very careful, very diligent, and you have to be honest and upfront. You cannot hide anything because they will find out. And my wife and I were both upfront, diligent, and it took us a year and a half, but it was finally closed, and we actually have a new life in front of us.
Yep, he's about 14 months out of discharge, and his credit is starting to go up already. It's very important that people realize bankruptcy is not an end. Bankruptcy is a restart.
That is correct. We actually were very fortunate. 2 months ago, we got a brand new lease on a brand new car. We are doing much better. You can get credit cards. We have 3 credit cards, but I will state, use them carefully.
Yes, you have gone through a full training with me and my crew on how to properly use credit cards.
Oh, yes. Try to stay within 25% of your credit limit.
Yep.
And pay off as much as you can each time. And as soon as you do that, you will see that your credit score each month keeps going up and up. My credit score was actually at 380. Now, not even a year later, my credit score is 695.
That's
awesome. You're
That's
solidly into the good credit zone, which begins at 680 to 750, and over 750 would be excellent. So you've gone less than 2 years after a bankruptcy, and you're in the solidly good credit zone. So that's impressive.
Very much
not,
so.
The only thing I could state to answer this question to the person who asked it, it's not your death sentence. It could actually be a new beginning for you.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And since you brought it up, I wanted to hit on the emotional side of even thinking about bankruptcy. People think of that as a death sentence, and you definitely have to have an attorney that's willing to work with you and show you why this isn't a death sentence. Like you said, it's a new beginning, and it can't, I mean, you can have sleepless nights over your finances. And I would venture to guess that you probably got a good night's sleep once the decision was made.
As Adam knows, there were many nights that I called Adam because of the time difference. I couldn't sleep. I was a basket case.
Yep.
I walked Tom and Nancy through their bankruptcy. I've done that for well over 100 clients over the past 5 years. Sometimes it's the best option. And when it is the best option, it's the first thing I recommend.
And I will say the nicest thing about going through this and going through with Adam, you don't only end up going through the bankruptcy and getting out of it, but during the course of the bankruptcy, you end up with a very good friend.
I try, and I hope that sometimes I succeed. All right, Kim, fire question 2 at me. Let's get rolling into deeper information on bankruptcy.
So we actually have a question from Jasper in Arkansas.
Okay.
And his question is, can anyone go bankrupt if they are in a financial hardship?
Okay, Jasper, that's a really good question because there are things that can prevent a bankruptcy. The number one thing is if you've already been bankrupt in the last 10 years, you cannot file a second time within a 10-year window. This was changed in 2005. It used to be that it was 2 years. That was the general rule since bankruptcy was invented, that you can't go bankrupt within 2 years. But in 2005, they changed it to a 10-year window before you can go bankrupt. Now, based on your question, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about how one qualifies for a bankruptcy. The first thing you do is you find that attorney, which we had in question 1. Once you found that attorney, they're going to be checking for 3 major things. They're going to check for your household income, they're going to check for your assets, and they're going to check for your liabilities to offset those assets. They're also going to see if you own more than one property and more than one vehicle. Because when you apply for bankruptcy, in most, but not all, but in most states, including Arkansas, as far as I know, you can exempt your home and one vehicle from your assets. It's called the homestead exemption, and it's available in almost every state. States that don't have it have other rules that allow for the same type of thing. Now, that being said, the median income is very important. It is not the average income. Median and average, people confuse the two quite often. The median income is exactly in the middle of all of the different incomes in your state. So, for instance, you would think New York and California would have the highest median incomes, but they do not, because they have a lot of low-income workers in those 2 states. And that brings the median down a little bit instead of up. Whereas in a state like Missouri, the median income is pretty high because a lot of the people there work in professional services and make more money, and there are less fast food chains than there are in California and New York paying low income. So it's very important that you know in advance, and you can look it up online, what the median income for your state is, because you cannot qualify for a Chapter 7 like what Tom was talking about. Chapter 7 is where all of your debt, as long as it isn't student loan or IRS or child support or alimony, those 4 things are exempt. But all of your other debt gets dismissed completely by the court, and there's no repayment.
Correct.
To qualify for that, you must earn less than the median income. That's the first test, is the median test. Now, the second test are your assets. A 401k, an IRA are all assets. And if you have those, the court will order you, rather than give you a Chapter 7, to dissolve them and pay your creditors. The process for bankruptcy, and I don't want to get into long detail on this, but the process for bankruptcy involves not a judge, but a trustee. The trustee meets with you and your attorney to get all the information and to ask you basically the Spanish Inquisition's worth of questions. And once they get the I'm going to get to you in a minute, Tom, because I know you're going to talk about your trustee meeting. But when you meet with the trustee, they actually have your best interest at heart. To be honest, their whole reason for being there is just to see if you can repay any of your debt or not, and they want the truth. And they'll get the truth one way or another. If they don't feel you're telling the truth, they'll subpoena from your bank and from other places records to see if what you tell them is the truth. I always suggest being 100% honest when you meet with your trustee. Your lawyer, if he's any good at what he does, is going to tell you, do not lie to your trustee, because that can cause your entire case to be thrown out, as well as it's considered perjury. And you can actually have a warrant go out for you, and you don't want that over some money, a little amount of money. Money is replaceable. Your freedom is not. It's not worth lying to your trustee.
Correct.
I love the details that you're giving, because people need to understand that when they're going into a bankruptcy situation, it is full disclosure. They will find out everything. And like you said, you need to be upfront and honest from the very beginning, because you will have to answer some very difficult questions. And if there's anything that comes up in the middle of all of this, you're in a worse off situation than when you started. So full disclosure, and not everyone will qualify based on the information that they have available to them and their ability to repay this. And I have heard of horror stories where people will literally go out, rack up all kinds of debt, knowing that they are going to be filing bankruptcy. And that's not the right course to take either.
No, legally that's considered fraud. just so everyone knows. I'm not an attorney. Nothing I give is legal advice. It is observational advice, and I have worked for attorneys in the capacity of paralegal. So it is not legal advice, but it is very important that you understand that I have been in the room when people have met with a trustee. I've been in the room when an attorney has gone over with a possible bankruptcy client what the rules are. If you go out and specifically charge up a lot of money or go on vacation knowing when you get back you're going to file bankruptcy and the trustee discovers that, you will not be able to go bankrupt, number one. You will get into a lot of trouble for quote unquote fraud. That is what it is. It is fraudulent use of credit. And it can carry a term of up to 5 years in prison. So you really do not want to do that. And to finish my answer for Jasper's question, the answer to your question properly and simplest is anyone can go see an attorney for free to get a bankruptcy review. Any good bankruptcy attorney will give you a free consultation to see if you're eligible. And that's number one way you can tell if your lawyer is legitimate at doing this or if they're new at doing this. If they want to charge you just to see if you're eligible, you have the wrong attorney.
Run the other way.
Now, Tom, you're an expert at this because you've been through it. Tell us a little bit about how your trustee meeting went.
Okay, I will state, Nancy and I sat in the room. It's horrifying and embarrassing, but you have to go through it. And my lawyer was there. You know, there were different clients. And the person before us, she was a doctor. And they state to you, you have to fill out a form stating, do you have jewelry? Do you have anything that can pay off debt? And you have to sign this paperwork stating in all honesty what you have as assets. My wife and I, through, as Adam knows, we eliminated everything we could to try to pay off what we could, and it wasn't enough. We had a doctor that went before the trustee before us, and the questions that were asked is, are you going to inherit money? That was the first question. Number two, do you have any jewelry or anything that is of value besides your home? Because in my case, my home was not included in the bankruptcy. The doctor in front of us, and she was retired, said, we have a safety deposit box. And the trustee stated at that point, why did you not mention this on your written application that is sitting in front of me? Because I gave it to my sister.
Ooch.
Wrong
Not good.
answer.
Yeah, not good.
Yep.
You cannot hand over your assets before you stand in front of a trustee. All I can state to whoever's going to file a bankruptcy, and Adam and you have stated, be honest and upfront, because it's not worth going to jail and having your life jeopardized. Freedom is one thing, and being in jail is not going to solve your problem because you're going to lose it anyway.
Well, not only that, but while you're in jail, interest continues to accrue on any debt you had while you were out. So
that is
you'll
correct.
end up coming out to an even bigger amount of debt than before you went in.
Exactly.
I've had clients in that position, believe it or not.
And believe me, all the trustees can find out everything that is in correlation to you, your wife, your family, whoever. So it goes to show they are 2 steps ahead of you. If you think you're ahead of them, you are mistaken.
Yes, you are.
And all those creditors are going to be fighting over for their chunk of change to get. Yep.
And they did. It was $38,000 that we received as part of an inheritance. and it ended up costing my wife and I $175. Don't think you're going to get away with it, because the courts and the system and the Federal Bureau knows exactly where you are, who you are, once you file bankruptcy.
Agreed.
Yep.
Now, Tom, here comes the fun part. We're going to ask question number 3 directly to you. You're going to start the answers this time. And this one comes from your neck of the woods. It's from Dawn in New York City. And she asks a very direct question with a very convoluted answer. She asks, and I quote, "How much does bankruptcy cost?"
Bankruptcy costs exactly what your lawyer is going to charge.
That's a well thought out answer, and that answer is the perfect answer, only because it's different in every state and every locality. It's different in each state because the courts charge a different amount for the filing in every state, but then the attorneys, they usually charge based on the amount of hours they think they're going to have to work on your
And
bankruptcy.
what the court is going to charge.
Right. So
Everything,
most of them have a flat
everything-
fee, but at the same time, they have a disclaimer you sign. And I think, Tom, you had to sign it, that if there's complications, that there may be additional charges.
That's correct.
And
But
also depending on which chapter you file, because a chapter 13 is going to take a little longer than a chapter 7. So
That's correct. But I will state honestly, and you don't have to be afraid that you're going to have to spend $20,000 to file your bankruptcy.
Now, that will never happen.
It cost me $2,500 to do my full bankruptcy, including the court charges.
Okay, so in New York, I know the court charges roughly, and I'm rounding it off, $800 for the filing.
Mine was $750 at the time. Yeah.
Okay, so
it's
I'm very, very close to what you paid. You're actually outside the city. I think it's a little more expensive in New York City. You're just above New York.
I'm in the upper Westchester, so it's a little cheaper than the city itself.
Now, that means that the attorney expected, just so people understand it, and it's clear, the attorney expected to spend about 4 hours working on, because attorneys charge on average about $300 an hour for their work. And so they expected to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 hours working on your bankruptcy, which is why he charges the flat fee of $2,500.
That's correct.
And that's how we got to that number. But I still love your answer, and I'm going to cut that out. With your permission, we're going to use that in one of our promos one day, because that answer was the perfect answer. There's more questions. In fact, Kim is about to throw. I'm about to throw the next question at Kim.
Okay, you can throw it or I can throw it. Jesse,
No. Get your glove on, because you're going to catch this one. This comes from Jesse in Delaware. Are there different types of bankruptcy for consumers? And I'm glad they said for consumers, because there's 26 different types of bankruptcies for business.
I was just going to say, we can go into a whole slew of different chapters, chapter 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 12. I mean, it goes on and on, like you said.
But all but 2 of those were business. All but 2 of the ones you just threw out there were business. Only 2 of them apply to consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll leave that to you, because I asked, you get to answer.
Mainly, consumers are looking at either a chapter 7 or a chapter 13, and it really depends on what their situation is. And Tom explained what his situation is. Chapter 7 is liquidation, where you're liquidating any of your assets to pay what you can, and what you can't, then they can be erased. And then you have your chapter 13, which is your repayment plan. But we have to make sure that there is enough income available to pay those debts. So it really depends on the situation. But chapter 7 and chapter 13 are the consumer bankruptcies that people would be deciding on. And chapter 7, usually done within 5 to 6 months, has everything fully discharged. But your chapter 13, your payment plan can be up to 5 years, depending on what the financial structure is.
Or longer.
Yep.
Or longer.
Tom, what would you like to add? Because once I start on this, I'm going to go. I know the details of both sides, and I have some very strong opinions about both.
In my case, the Chapter 7 was more relieving for myself and for my wife. And it all depends on your situation. I mean, I had some assets that I could relinquish and have it brought down to a point where it wasn't so painful. Chapter 13, there was no way, as you know, Adam, with me trying to repay things, that I could have gone through that for 5 or 6 years. It was too painful. It was too long.
It was also too erratic. You were in flux, and that's one of the things I'm going to touch on is why, if you're told about a Chapter 13 and that's all you qualify for, you really need to reconsider the idea of bankruptcy. And I will explain that in detail once
Correct.
you finish. So I'll let you finish. But yeah, it was too much flux for you because you had no idea if and when that house was going to settle, and it still wouldn't have been enough money even when you received the funds to finish your whole debt program. So you
That's
still
correct.
adding, your job was in flux because the company was up for sale and you didn't know if you were going to be able to keep your job or not.
And my wife lost her job.
Right. Your wife lost her job and then was too ill to work for a while. So you had a whole bunch of moving parts going on. And I told you before I referred you that the only type of bankruptcy you could look for would be a Chapter 7 in your situation, because you wouldn't meet the long-term qualifications for a Chapter 13.
And there was no way I could go the 5 or 6 years. Some people can. It all depends on their financial status, you know, if they're both working or they still have jobs. In my case, it was my company was folding and my wife actually lost her job due to illness. So I had to do the best I could, and per your instruction and per the lawyer, Chapter 7 at that point was the best situation for me to pursue.
And as we've seen by what you've told us earlier, it actually was very successful for you, and that's a good thing. You sound happier than you did the whole 2 years you were in our program, and we had a lot of success in our program for you. It just it became overwhelming when your wife and her medical issues came to bear, and the fact that you kept on getting told at work that it may only be a few more weeks. And it was at that point you and I started our discussions together. And I treat every customer like that, just so everyone knows. If you come into Friendly Debt Relief, U.S. Financial Alliance, Financial Rescues, any of the companies where I manage the customer service, I will take your phone call happily, and I will go into the type of detail that I went into for Tom when he was my client.
I will state honestly, where if I can interrupt you, you went above and beyond being available to me at all times.
I even spoke to your attorney.
Yes, you did.
And he and I are still friends to this day. It was the first time I'd ever spoken to him. I got his referral off of several lawyer websites, and that's why I recommended him to you. And then I spoke to him personally for the first time, and he and I still talk to this day. Very nice gentleman, very to the point. But, all right, I'm going to take the stage now, because Chapter 7, Chapter 13, blondes or brunettes? Chocolate or vanilla? You know, I don't think so. There is a humongous difference between the two. The difference is wider than the Grand Canyon. Although both fall under the name bankruptcy, when people think of bankruptcy, they think about all their debt getting cleared out. That's what people think. That's what the word brings to mind is, oh God, it's all going to go away. And then you can breathe that sigh of relief and move on with your life. But that's not true. It's not true of a Chapter 13 that's the case. That is not the case. It is the opposite of that. I do not recommend a Chapter 13 to 99% of the people who qualify for it. And let me get into the reasons why, because I have several reasons why. If you can't qualify for a Chapter 7, you might be better off looking into other debt relief options than saying yes to the Chapter 13 that the lawyer will offer you. Our courts are set up a certain way, and we all know that. You know, we know the basics from the Constitution. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty, and we know that judges are supposed to be open-minded and fair until they hear the evidence. And we also know that, you know, the cost of gas should never be $5 a gallon. The fact is, there are gas stations that charge $5 a gallon, and there are judges that have preconceived notions because that's the way they were raised, and they can't help themselves. So, unfortunately, the idea of a Chapter 13, a structured by the court repayment plan, is corrupt to begin with. And I don't mean corrupt in the legal sense. I just mean corrupt in the fact that other people's opinions come into play rather than the facts. A trustee is hard enough to placate in a Chapter 7 sitting. As Tom was explaining, that doctor's explaining her, her assets, her liabilities, and Tom has to come clean and say, well, we're waiting on an inheritance from a property in another state, and it could take forever to find out if it even has any value to us or not. In a Chapter 13, it gets even worse. Because in a Chapter 13, the court is going to decide then and there what you're going to pay to your creditors every month for the next 5 years.
Yep.
So I have a question right away. Well, let's say that I'm a Verizon corporate executive and I make $75,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year. And my wife has a job and she makes $25,000, $30,000 for her job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I have 2 cars and I have a house and I have 2 kids. And 4 months after I enter into the Chapter 13, where the court figured out my budget and what I could pay my creditors based on my 100,000, my wife's 30,000, the fact that I have 2 kids, the fact that I have 2 cars, they figured I can pay $2,000 a month to my creditors. But then my wife loses her job. Well, the court doesn't care about that. They said I have to pay $2,000. And then Verizon lays me off. They cut their court, they give me a package or whatever they do, and they let me go. And I end up getting another job, but it's only $60,000 a year. Well, now my household income went to half of what it was, but the court still has me paying $2,000 a month. I'd have to start over from scratch and pay again the entire fee to be heard again in court to see if maybe, and it's a maybe, they'll adjust my repayment plan.
And the chances of that are slim to none.
At best, they're 50%.
And you cannot go back and file a Chapter 7.
Right, you
No.
cannot change. Once you
have to wait
accept the
6
13,
Yep.
6 years. Yep.
6 years.
6 years to change it to a Chapter
Yeah.
7. So if after 6 years you haven't completed your Chapter 13, then you can file to the
Then.
court to say, look, I'm never going to make it. Can you just switch it to a Chapter 7? And you still get said no to if you don't meet the median income test.
Right.
That's the problem, though. The problem is, and you'll hear me say this throughout our series, it's one of my favorite lines in the whole world. Life happens. There's no way to avoid it. If you're breathing, life will happen to you, no matter what.
You never know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Now, some people
Right.
say, you're being so negative. No, not at all.
No.
When I got married, that was life happening. It was one of the best days of my life. Life happens, can be good, can be bad, can be indifferent, but life continues to happen. And when a court sets in stone a payment for you, they don't take into consideration that life happens. There was a time in the 1950s and 60s where you got a job and that was your job until you retired, and that was the end of the story.
Yep.
That's incredibly rare now. Less than 2% of people stay in the same job 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Most that is true.
Yep, it is completely different than it used to be. We have a much more transient work life than we ever did before, even in the same company, because you may work in the New York corporate offices or the California corporate offices, and your family wants to move, and you end up moving to Mississippi, where the cost of living is 1/8 of what it was in California, right? But you still keep your corporate pay because you're moving to their offices in Mississippi, where your salary is already set in stone anyway. So now all of a sudden you went from being lower middle class to upper middle class, and your income hasn't changed at all.
Right.
Correct.
So I don't recommend Chapter 13s for that reason. That's one. The second reason is the worst of the whole thing. I don't want a court to ever decide whether or not I can buy a Dunkin' Donuts latte, or a Starbucks latte, or a bagel with cream cheese. But in a Chapter 13, you're giving the court the ability to force you onto the budget they choose for you.
Exactly. Yes.
They will make a list of all your regular expenses, and they'll ask you about personal things. How many times do you go to the movies in a month? How many times do you go out to eat in a month? They will ask these questions. I've seen it happen live in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, they are creating the budget that they feel in their minds you should follow, except
They
for
are
one problem.
controlling your
Yep, they are controlling everything. But here's the thing. You see, once you start your payment plan on a Chapter 13, that's a court order,
Right.
like any other court order. So if you miss a payment to your Chapter 13, you're not just in default. You've broken the law. You have violated a court order, and a warrant does go into the system. And if you get stopped for running a red light or a stop sign somewhere, and they see that, you are going to jail. You will get out pretty quick as long as you can find an attorney. It's not a punishable offense. We're not talking about life in prison or the electric chair, but you will not be held for the ticket. The ticket will be the least of your concerns. You're going to be held for contempt of court and for violating a court order. And that's much more intricate. And your attorney fees to get out are going to be a lot higher than defending a speeding ticket or running a stop sign or even a DUI, believe it or not. Violating a court order is more serious than a DUI.
It's all
Right.
about giving up your control of your finances. I mean, you have completely given up control of
And
your
there are
budget.
a lot of methods out there that you have 100% control over that work better than a Chapter 13. And there are some where you split the control, like the debt relief programs that I work in, Financial Rescuers and Friendly Debt Relief and all the other, debt relief companies that I do consult to. Those programs are wonderful as long as you choose the right company. Now, my last pet peeve on Chapter 13, and then we can move on to the final question of the day. But my final pet peeve is the success rate is 20%. Only 2 out of 10 people that go into Chapter 13 complete it successfully.
Mm-hmm.
I would never do anything where my success rate is only an estimated 20%. And I certainly wouldn't pay $3,500 to $5,000 to have a 20% success.
Exactly.
So I don't recommend Chapter 13. I recommend you look at all of your other possible options: consumer credit counseling programs, debt relief programs, nonprofit, for-profit, ignore profit. I don't care. I don't care if it's the profit of your religion. Profit's not the problem here. You see, I try to explain this to people who are like, well, debt relief charges a 20% fee, and that's way too much. Is it? Is it way too much? No, I know the answer is no, but I'm going to show you why it's no very, very simply and very quickly, because we are running out of time, and I want to get to our third segment, which is a lot more fun than any of the others we've had, and that's the crossfire. But it's real simple. If you owe $10,000 to Bank A, whoever that may be, and the debt relief company says to you that for $6,000, that debt will be zeroed out and your credit will start healing, and they certify that in writing, on paper, and they get it done, does it matter whether they paid Bank A $50 and took the other $5,550 in fees? No, because your debt still is at zero.
Mm-hmm.
The fee is irrelevant. The question is, what are you going to pay to have that debt resolved permanently and on your credit report show a zero balance? So the fee is irrelevant.
Right.
A lawyer could charge you even more than that. I mean, lawyers are exempt from all the debt settlement rules across the country, and they can charge whatever their lawyer fees are. Some lawyers charge $1,000 an hour. Most charge about $300, but $1,000 an hour. Do you know how many hours I worked just on Tom's case for the year and a half he was with me before he went bankrupt?
Mm-hmm.
That would have cost him $30,000 at $1,000 an hour.
Right.
Or more.
Stop worrying about what the fees are and worry about two things. Do I have to pay those fees up front? If you do, go find another company.
Right. Yep.
So if the fees are up front, find another company, because you shouldn't have to pay up front for the service to be done, because what happens if the service can't be completed?
Correct.
If the fees are leveled out and you pay a little bit each month while the process is happening, that's fine. That I understand. That's like giving your doctor the copay even though you haven't been in his office yet. That's fine. I get that. But if you have to pay your whole fee up front, no. Walk away, say, I'm going to find somebody else. You know that you have a bad actor.
Yep.
However, stop worrying about what the fee is. Asking what the fee is like asking in an interview, well, when's my vacation?
That's very true.
It's
Yep.
the same
Yep.
thing. So stop worrying about what the fee is for the service, because if you look at the back of your credit card statement and you owe $10,000 to Bank A, on the back of your statement, it's going to tell you if you pay the minimum payment, it's going to take you 16 years at a total cost of $22,000 to
Yep.
pay that $10,000 off.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
there are your choices.
And this is exactly why you and I do what we do, so that we educate our clients. We don't offer a one-size-fits-all solutions. Neither one of us do, but our main goal is making sure that our clients are educated, they're knowledgeable, they know the ins and outs, and they know what to look for. So kind of went down a rabbit trail there, but
yeah, that was a long one, and I knew it would be, but there's one more question that I'm going to throw it well, you're supposed to throw it at me, but I'm just going to put it out there.
And I think Tom would be the one to answer this.
Tom, then you, and I'll give a final word on it because I don't have a lot to say on this. You two are going to be able to answer this in great detail. So our final question of the day, Tom, is for you. It's from Gene in Oklahoma. Doesn't bankruptcy ruin your credit forever?
No.
You're
Well,
a perfect
now,
example of that, right?
hold on. That answer was too long and convoluted.
I actually was terrified of declaring the bankruptcy. I was terrified of what was going to happen. You hear horror stories, but the horror story is only what you make of it.
Correct.
My horror story was cut very quickly because I got back on the bike. I started pedaling, and I made my credit better as fast as I could. Open up the first thing I'm going to say to you. It may sound stupid. Open up one credit card, and it doesn't matter who it's with, even if it's for $500. Don't go above a $5,000 credit limit if you can't afford it.
Exactly. Now, the fun part is, though, once you become the master of your credit, once you learn all the tricks, tips, etc., and that's what this show is going to be about going forward over the course of the next 24 weeks as we put out 24 episodes for this season. We're going to give everybody tips and tricks to make sure they don't fall into that rabbit hole that Tom is describing here. That's the whole purpose for us being here. We're not trying to sell you on anything. We're not telling you to call us today and get a discount. That's not what this is about. This is about passing on our knowledge to you. And if you want to know more, you will be able to call us, any one of us.
All this is trying to help people not fall into the hardship or the traps that are sitting out there.
And there's lots of them.
Exactly.
There's so many of them.
Yep.
All right.
And
So
that you may not always see the trap, but be careful.
now I'm going to have some fun, Kim. You
Let's
ready
go.
to laugh? Okay.
Let's go.
There's something about Tom you don't know. Now, you know Tom has worked for me, and you know he's been a client, and you know he's gone bankrupt.
Yes.
There's something else that Tom did, though. When I hired Tom, it wasn't to go and meet with clients. When I hired Tom, it wasn't to be a negotiator. It wasn't to be a reception person. It wasn't to be a clerical person. Tom had a very specific job for financial rescuers. And I'm going to have him talk a little bit about that job in order to end this show today, because it was a fascinating job that he did. Now, wait, I'm going to explain it first, Tom. I'm going to explain it first because I have a perfect explanation for what you did. Tom's job was more important to the consumer than anything I did. It was more important than anything that the negotiators did. Tom had one job, and he didn't have to speak to a single human being to do it. So now let's get into what Tom's job was. We own at Financial Rescuers, and now at U.S. Financial Alliance, they have followed in suit, a switchboard with hundreds of phone numbers across the country, at least 2 in every state. And we have clients forward all of their collection calls to these numbers. They are local to the client. So if you live in the 312 area code in Chicago, right? You live in the 312 area code, you're going to have all your calls forward to 312, whatever the number is on our switchboard. And you're going to hear a voicemail that is a standardized voicemail saying, sorry, we can't take your call right now. Leave us a message and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you. Standard voicemail message.
Right.
And creditors are going to leave their messages. Now, we look for Fair Debt Collection Practice Act violations, as do all good debt relief companies. We love to find those because those help our clients by A, dismissing their debt, and B, getting them a $1,000 check for the violation. So we love to find errors done by creditors, especially since they harass the heck out of people when people fall behind. Tom's job was to listen to all the messages left on that switchboard and filter out the ones where there might be an FDCPA violation.
Oh, please.
And Tom heard some really crazy things on some of those recordings. So I'm going to let Tom talk about that a little bit because that had to be the most interesting job he's ever had.
That is awesome.
Kim, it was very interesting. I mean, you'd hear everything from every curse word all the way through down to you owe money, you better call us back. Or the best ones, as Adam knows, were the ones that start out with, hi, I'm a friend of yours. Do you know that you owe money? I'm listening to these and I'm saying to myself, oh my God, I got to listen to 1,000 of these. And Adam would send me, what was it, 100 at a time?
Yeah, we sent them at 100 a clip about twice a week.
And
so about 200 to 400 a week that you had to sit and listen to. And Tom would tell me he'd be sitting there. His wife is reading a book, and he's sitting there with his headphones on, listening to these voice messages.
And my poor wife, God bless her, she's looking at me, and I start laughing, and she goes, that must have been a good one. But the thing was, it is so unbelievable how sneaky some of these people could be. And it was so cruel and so degrading. And I myself, as Adam knows, went through some of these calls personally, where I received them. It's a shame that people can't just be upfront and state, please call us back. There is a problem, and we'd like to negotiate or work with you to resolve this problem. No, you get phone calls. Hi, this is such and such. Could you please call us when you get a minute? Which is perfectly legal. But then you get some of them that were not legal at all.
All right, Tom, I have to ask you, how many times have you heard this statement? You ready?
Don't say it.
Express about a personal business matter. We need your attention as soon as possible, so call us back at 1-800, blah, 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 blah.
I must have heard that statement 1,000 times.
A personal business matter. Ooh.
And they don't state what the matter is,
Of course not. They want you to call back. Then they trap you into a what we call a debt call, where they literally are trained in psychological warfare for those calls. I've sat in on some of those trainings, and Kim can tell you she learned something about me yesterday. I'm a master at psychological warfare. I proved it to a client of hers that's going to be a client of ours yesterday when I forced them to pick a card they didn't even know they wanted to pick.
Which I did the same practice on my son. Worked beautifully.
I told you, it works 100% of the time if you do it right. And it's very easy. What you're doing is simply leading someone to pick what you want them to pick. And there's no way to avoid it because you've drawn the map. So there's no way out from the road you've drawn. There's nowhere else to go but to the end you want to get to. And that's what they do on these collection calls. And I gave Tom a full training on them. We listened to a bunch together to start off. And I told him what you're looking for. What you're looking for is the word debt because they're not supposed to say that in a voicemail because they don't know who's hearing that voicemail. FDCPA violations include the following: calling before 8 a.m., calling after 8 p.m., calling on Sunday, with a few exceptions. There are some exceptions to that.
And there were some calls that I actually heard the time that they called.
Right. They were all time stamped for the location, for the area code that they were calling to. And we look for those violations because we do have a wonderful law firm, and I'm going to plug him. FDCPA lawyer extraordinaire out of San Diego and Phoenix. His name is Jeffrey Lohman. He is a miracle worker when it comes to protecting consumers from unfair debt collection practices. And no, we are not being paid to advertise him. He is an incredible attorney. I've been in his office. I've spoken to his partner, and he has helped our clients achieve major successes against creditors who are harassing them. That being said, just other FDCPA violations is telling anyone other than you, your spouse, or your attorney that you owe money. Is illegal. Calling
correct.
5 times in one day is illegal.
Yep.
If you ever want to look it up for yourselves, dear audience, F as in Frank, D as in David, C as in Charlie, Frank, David, Charlie, C, P as in Peter, A as in all of us. FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Look it up. It's not that long.
Very well.
Yep. Knowing it can help you a lot if you have outstanding debt and a collector calling or chasing you. But there's our crossfire for today. Tom was the man who listens to all the messages, and Tom is the reason that more than 11 clients got a $1,000 check because he identified FDCPA violations and forwarded them over to Attorney Lohman, who then prosecuted them.
That is so cool.
I enjoyed it, though, and I have to say, I'm not promoting Adam, but he's one of the best people that I've ever been introduced to.
Oh,
even though we've never personally met, he's a down-to-earth person who is willing to help anybody.
That's
I appreciate
exactly what
your
we're all
kind
about.
words. I really do appreciate your kind words. I've said it many times, and Kim knows it because she's tested me on it. I make myself available. I've been CEO of several companies, and I've never had a secretary put up a wall to stop people from getting to me. I don't believe in that. I am open. I am honest as the day is long, and I will tell you the truth, even if the truth hurts. Because it's better that you know it and we pull the Band-Aid off and let it heal and move forward. And I've had clients that wanted to come and kill me who left me the most beautiful reviews you'll ever see on the BBB pages. And these are clients who are like, this is a scam. You're ripping me off. And when the program's over, and then Adam said, I'd have to pay X, Y, and Z. And I got 3 lawsuits in 1 week. But don't you know, Adam's team blocked all 3 lawsuits, got all 3 debts settled. This is right there on the BBB to read. U.S. Financial Alliance, LLC. You can look it up on the BBB and you can read what I just said. You'll see it there under, I believe it's under Robert M.
And if you can ever get to meet this man, you will be amazed because he's 1 in a million.
Oh yeah.
Hey Tom, don't count yourself out. You're pretty high up that ladder yourself.
That's why I do what I do, and that's why I partnered with Adam. We have a lot to offer, and
Kim is one of the sweetest people I've ever worked with. She and I have traded ideas several times. In fact, we've been invited to this huge mega meeting tonight that we're both going to be at.
Yep, I can't wait for that.
In separate rooms, telling people all about ourselves.
Well,
mostly Chicago natives.
Don't either one of you back down. Just promote yourselves because you're both beautiful.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. You have provided a wealth of information to our clients, and we greatly appreciate you being our very first guest. This is very, very exciting, and I definitely know we're going to have you on again.
No doubt. Hopefully next time we can get that pretty face.
Yeah. I may crack the camera.
Oh, I'll go with what Nancy says. It may not be the greatest face, but it's the face she loves to look at.
There you go. You guys both stay safe.
You as well. Yep.
Yes, to everybody. To you, Tom, and
Well,
your whole
and
family, and Kim, and everybody else, I just want to. This is the last thing I'm going to say today: is stay safe, stay healthy, listen to the
and everybody
science.
will everybody will make it through this.
That's the hope. Yep.
Yep. We
All
will.
right. God bless both of you. Thanks
You
again
as well.
for
All righty, Tom. I'm going to
Thank
throw this
you.
out there really quick. Keep up every week with cruising into a better financial future, because we are not only talking bankruptcy like we did today. We're going to give tips and tricks for building your credit score up, how to properly use your bank account so that they actually make you money, even if you only have $500 in the bank. We're going to talk to attorneys who help with debt relief. We're going to talk to debt relief specialists who help with debt relief. We've already booked the owner of the founder of U.S. Financial Alliance, where I'm chief operating officer. He's going to talk with us about loans, and he's done a short segment with us about it before, but we're going to have him as a full-blown guest in the near future. We also have some celebrity guests down the road that are working on booking with us. So even though we may not look big, we're actually huge.
the only thing I ask is, whenever there's something coming down the pike, or whenever you're going to have the show, please inform me so I could listen and be part of it.
I promise to get you on our email list. And here's the fun part, Tom. You do drive a bit here and there. And for that reason, if you're not able to tune into our YouTube channel, we're also going to be, thanks to Anchor Podcasting, we will be broadcast to all the major wherever you get your podcast from, we will be there.
We'll be there too. Yep.
So you can listen while you drive.
It was great talking to both of you, and I hope some people learned some things.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that they learn that bankruptcy is not the end. I'm going to let Kim have the final word. This is her show, and Cruz Credit Consulting is a great company. Empowering women all the time. Kim hosts a women's empowerment club for entrepreneurs every week. For those that don't know it, I'm going to boost her ego a little bit. Because everyone that's come to me to work with me in my On Target, another company I own. Yes, I own a few, I admit it. On Target Strategies LLC, which is my business consulting firm. Kim has sent me a few people, and they rave about how much information that Kim gave them that was useful to help them get expanded, on top of referring them to me. I'm just a little tiny piece of the puzzle. I'm the nickel in the dollar that makes up the company. But the fact of the matter is no one's ever had a bad word to say. And I am more than pleased, more than enthused, and more than ecstatic to be partnering with you in this new venture, our new show.
Me as well. Me as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. This has been huge. Like Adam said, I have so many things going on right now. Cruz Credit Consulting. My passion is helping people cruise into a better financial future. We have this podcast. I have my brand new ebook, 99 Financial Literacy Points You Should Have Been Taught, because we all know this isn't something that's taught in school.
Excellent read, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. So keep joining us every week for a new topic.
Submit your questions for Kim and I to answer with our guest on air by sending them to questions@cruisingintoabetterfinancialfuture.com. That's cruisin, CRUZIN, intoabetterfinancialfuture.com. Questions@cruisingintoabetterfinancialfuture.com, and we will try to answer your questions in one of our shows. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a wonderful day. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week. Thank you for being a part of Cruising into a Better Financial Future. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. We'll see you next time. Bye.